I mean, like the keyboard is covering
We're live. We're live.
the keyboard is covering your face, so that's strange.
Hi, everybody.
Okay,
Are you?
hey everybody. Thank you for your patience. Great.
Well, good. Lars, thanks for confirmation. You can see us even if we can't see
Yeah.
each other. Very good.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Do you want
What are
to?
we talking about?
Well, we should introduce ourselves first, or at least I should introduce me since most
Yeah,
people don't know me.
yeah, good point. I'm Chris.
If you're here, you probably know Chris because you follow him on Substack.
Yep.
um, I also follow Chris on Substack, and also I've been working with Chris for the last several months. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm really interested in new ways of organizing as humans and passionate about communication in ways that helps us feel connected to one another. So we're here to talk about your most recent videos about feedback.
Yeah, yeah, and excited to chat with you more about it. Yeah, Ruth and I have been collaborating for, I don't know, 2 months or so on some stuff. So yeah, excited. But I'll let you kind of lead it. And
Yep.
tell me what we should get into. I'll talk
Cool.
about this stuff all day.
Lars, new ways of organizing. Yes, exactly. New ways of organizing as humans. Our old ways, I think, are, in my opinion, are outdated. Um, yeah, if you have any questions or comment, like please put stuff in the chat. We'll try to keep an eye on it and integrate what you guys are saying as this is our first time trying this platform, so bear with us with any tech issues. Um, yeah, so one of your recent Substack posts was about some videos you did about feedback and how to have feedback more effective, and I would love to talk through kind of each one of those. Um, and the first one was about setting the stage and like basically asking permission to offer feedback so that people have a chance to decide if they're in a space to accept feedback or not accept feedback. And my first question for you about that, first off, I love that idea. I've done that in general with like conflict conversations or like
Mhm.
I find when I ask people permission, it like, even if it would have been a really hard conversation, there's something about asking someone, do you have the space for this? That even if they didn't have the space for it, the asking of the space like sometimes creates the space. Like, oh, well, actually, I can ready myself if I have a second.
I think that's exactly it. Yeah, like otherwise, I think in that video I call them like feedback bombs of the just like dropping it on somebody, which can create a lot of problems. Just the fact that you kind of non-consensually just said, "Hey, here's a bunch of stuff," right? And like I may be having a reaction to that, but I'm also not really in the right space to that for that. And then I've got to try to now manage the awkwardness of it. But if you set the context and let me know you want to talk about it and give me a chance, then I may say, no, I'm not up for it right now. But that would be great. But yeah, more than likely, yeah, people end up kind of like, yeah, sure. What is this about or something? But makes a world of difference. Yeah. What was your question?
I think my main question is about literally specifically the word feedback. Like I'm thinking about, so I work in a bunch of different contexts. I work with you where we're definitely working in a more like evolved or different way of organizing. I work in a French bakery cafe in town that is definitely in like an old power hierarchy. And then I work for a nonprofit that's kind of in between. Like they're working towards implementing a new way, but we're still learning as a team how to do that.
Yeah.
And when I think about using the word feedback, like literally asking someone, like if I think about asking you, that feels totally fine. Like if you're open for some feedback because you and I are on like an equal playing field. If I think about it in the nonprofit, that's kind of in a hybrid, that still feels pretty good. But if I think about it at work, where I'm like not the boss and like where there's a power hierarchy and I ask, are you open to some feedback? I feel like it automatically creates this weird dynamic of like I'm not supposed to offer feedback to my boss. Like it feels like there's a so I guess that's my first question. And like even with some like with friends, I feel like the word feedback has like almost a connotation of like I'm above you or like I don't know. At least that's the context I'm used to
Yeah.
having them in is like my boss is giving me feedback and not like so I don't know. I'm just wondering about the word itself and if you have any ideas of like if or experience of like how has that word landed for people and or other ideas of how to ask the question?
Yeah.
Are you open to?
I have an opinion on this. So my general stance is like I like the word feedback, maybe counterintuitively for some of the same reasons, right? Like what I find worse is trying to do it without acknowledging what it is, right? Like part of the big problem is, oh, I don't want to just do that. So let me try to sneak it in, which causes, I would say, majority of the issues. And then the people learn the wrong lesson, which is, okay, I better be really subtle next time to not create that conflict, which is
Mm,
like, yeah, but that's actually probably at least making it much more likely to have, to not land, is you're not just kind of owning it and being like, this is what I want to offer you. That's kind of, so that's kind of the initial thing about the word.
makes
I
sense.
like the word. Um, but my caveat is I like that word if that's what you're doing. Because a lot of times people say feedback and they don't really mean feedback. They mean like I have some tension. So
Oh,
feedback is like like if you and I are working together and you're putting together like a product, right? And like there's like some third party involved, or I'm kind of like a customer of your product, right? Then feedback's a good word, right? Because it's like, hey, as the customer or just as a collaborator, using my perspective and my experience, I want to share some insight and I'm leaving it up to you, what you may want to do with it or to explore it further, et cetera. That's feedback. But if it's more like I have attention that I want to process, I want to give you some feedback.
you just blew my mind. That's totally probably what I'm doing is like something about how you're working isn't working for me. And what I want to say is,
Exactly. Feedback.
right. Yeah, because I'm like, the way you're working isn't working for me. And I want to couch it as feedback instead of like, wow, okay, this is blowing my brain. Because feedback would be like the way you phrase that might like this is how it lands. Like it's almost like constructive criticism, like a way of like
Yeah.
where
General.
you can then take it and do with it as you will, and it doesn't affect me. Like, but if you
Bingo.
don't take my feedback and it affects me, it's probably because it wasn't actually feedback, it was attention.
Right. And that's what's so nasty about why the word has become, synonymous with kind of a certain kind of icky nastiness, is because people try to do like basically I have attention, I have judgments, I have concerns, you've impacted me, and I don't want to be held responsible for your response to what I'm about to tell you. So here you go. I'm gonna right, just here you go. There's my blah 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 blah. Whew. Now I feel good when the other person's like, well, wait a minute, right? Like I may disagree, I may have questions, or what. And it's like, hey, this is just feedback, right? Like, hey, don't involve me. This is just it's a very, again, it's not something people do, consciously, but that's the point, right? Let's acknowledge what it is. So yeah, if it's actually feedback, call it feedback. And if it's not, call it something else.
That just blew my brain. Okay, I'm gonna have to mull over that for a while. I'm gonna address what I can't Ben, was it Ben? Um, being direct and how to make sure there's psychological safety. That's an excellent question because I'm thinking about like I have one coworker I work with where we butt heads all the time. And I would say there is no psychological safety. If either one of us said, "Can I offer you feedback?" even if it was genuinely feedback, I think the other person would be instantly defensive.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's an interesting question about the psychological safety or like how do you
Yeah. And I would connect it. I mean, I wrote an article, I think, on this of like there are two ways of thinking about psychological safety. There's like the conventional way is kind of more oriented around like comfort and like I am what? Like yeah, comfortable, not uncomfortable, not irritated, right? I can feel safe. Okay, well, the other way that I emphasize in the article is around predictability, right?
okay.
It's like if because reality necessarily includes things that are uncomfortable, I don't think the safety equals comfort is a good definition or a good model to approach. But what I do personally like is this idea of predictability, right? If I know that the stove is hot, then I can avoid it, right? I don't have to worry as much about it. If it's very obvious what everything is, this is going to be a certain kind of thing, this is going to be a different kind of thing, right? And it orients around like maybe harm or what it's going to involve in the context. But it's a similar kind of framing to this idea of setting the stage, right? It's about being predictable, right? People feel safer around people who are predictable and environments that are predictable because that means they can navigate them. And that gives us safety and a much, I would say, deeper, stronger sense of safety than the one that's based around trying to avoid discomfort. Yeah, and it helps with emotional regulation. I mean, it just helps everything, right? And it also allows you, as the person giving the feedback, a lot more, you know, comfort and confidence if the person has explicitly said, "Yeah, I'm up for that."
Huh.
Right? Then you're like, "Okay, well." great. But of course, yeah, the
Absolutely.
setting the stage stuff is not all that's there, but that is a big one.
Very cool. And also welcome, Patrick. Um, okay. I think that's most of my thoughts about setting the stage. Do you have anything else you want to say about that before I move on to the next piece of
No, no, but I will say, yeah, if people are joining, like if you have questions, please chat them in. This is a bit, it's an experiment of how this the platform is going to work with this. But it's obvious we can see your comments, so that would be awesome. Keep them coming, comments and questions.
careful what you wish for.
I'm
Exactly. Um,
consenting to feedback.
nice.
Mm.
Touche. Okay, so the second video you had was about tracking and how, and it very much ties into what we were just talking about asking for feedback. That the idea of if you don't have a place and a system to track the feedback you want to offer people, then you're setting yourself up to deliver feedback bombs because if I don't say it now, I'm not going to remember, and so I'm just going to get it out to you whether you're ready for it or not. And this was like such a simple thing that I had never thought about that like
Mhm.
totally resonated for me. I'm like, "Oh, shit, that's exactly what I'm doing." It's like, it's on my mind. I have ADHD, so if it's on my mind, I gotta get it off my mind right now, and so whatever regardless of what's going on with you, I'm just gonna give it to you, and that is not so that just kind of blew my brain. I don't have a good system yet for that. I'm curious how
Right.
you do that or what that looks like for you, but the fact that I don't have one is now blaringly obvious. Urgency of feedback. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great, interesting, deep kind of topic in itself. I'll just connect the dots between, like, for me, this is largely stuff that came from getting things done, GTD practice. It came from holacracy practice, of being able to keep track of stuff. An expectation that you're going to be keeping track of stuff outside of your head, and you've got some sort of regular review and prioritization of that stuff. In other words, kind of decoupling this idea of like the thoughts that you have, the tensions that you feel, and then the job of prioritizing them, deciding what, if anything, to do about them, right? And kind of making those things separate. It's not, I think of it not unlike kind of the, I don't know what it is an adage or a motto, something about like not going to the grocery store hungry, not going grocery shopping while you're hungry because you're going to tend to buy things that are not healthy for you versus, right. And this is true regardless of that particular point about just shopping in general, right, for stuff like that, for kind of your weekly items, right. We keep lists because we think of stuff throughout the day. And then we're going to need to know to remember it in the right context when we can actually buy it. Or nowadays, we can buy stuff online too. So that works well too. So it's not kind of unlike that in principle of like, well, if you don't keep it somewhere else, then you're going to either be doing, your brain's going to be doing overtime to try to keep track of it and you're going to miss things. So that then means you're either going to not give the feedback at all and it just potentially become like a source of resentment or something. That's not good. So, basically these are all bad options, right? And then the other option is then the feedback bomb idea of like, well, hey, um, I actually for my own need just want to give you the information right now so I don't have to track it. Though that's not typically conscious, but it's a logical, understandable, and predictable, way of handling it if you don't have a way of writing it down when you think of that feedback and then figuring out how to process it separately. Then, of course, you're not going to really be open to someone saying no because for you, that's the only way you have to process it.
Right. Which is definitely what has happened to me in the past. Like, there's,
Yeah.
like, almost a panic response, like, "What do you mean you're not open to feedback?" Like, and it had never occurred to me that that part of that was, I don't have a well, it's also, I think, a fear of, like, you're never gonna be open to feedback,
Well,
like,
that's
there's
the.
that too.
I was going to say, yeah, because for me, the question is, are you open to feedback? Is always means right now,
Right.
and the follow on is always if it's a no, right? There's we're not done. There's always a, well, when or what would be the best way to get that to you, right? Like I'm owning it's basically like it's my attention. This thing I want to share with you. It's not yours. You're awesome. You're doing, you're living your life. You're doing the best you can with the resource yet. Like I'm trying to figure out what to do with this stuff. I want to offer it. Again, this is already within, we're already talking about kind of true feedback, not stuff masquerading as feedback.
Right.
So if it's true feedback, then yeah, then if someone's like, no, not right now, I am very genuinely interested in like the truth, right? Is it if it's now or not, right? Might not be a good time. Cool. But I'm gonna still follow up before I just stop mentioning it because I want to feel like I've processed my attention, so it's no longer a thing that I'm tracking or having to worry about.
Right. Okay, cool. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Lars had a question. This is an interesting question. He said, seems like being open to feedback is a new kind of fake leadership norm. Could you say more about how and when to open up to feedback? Great question.
Yeah, I mean, okay, it's tricky because yeah. So sure, there's a certain like I would almost call it like receptivity in the sense of like a leadership a leadership stance, a certain kind of openness and receptivity to I'm going to use very kind of abstract terms, but like stimuli, right? Like I'm open, present, and open to the stimuli of my environment, which may include someone saying I have some feedback. Um, but if we assume kind of like there's a leadership, supporter, leadership, or supervisor or subordinate kind of relationship in some way, then what tends to happen in those dynamics is, not unlike what you just mentioned, Ruth, is that someone will present you with feedback that's not really feedback. It's really something that they want to kind of process. And that's much more, nuanced or complicated because they're presenting it as something and they may genuinely believe that they're just giving feedback when, right? Like you're reading the signs and it doesn't feel just like feedback, like they want something out of that. So, yeah. We could talk more about maybe if you're in that leadership position, how to respond. But I would just say like one of the ways to identify the difference is kind of like, would you care if the other person did anything with that information, right? Versus right, like I care about getting you the information, and then I may prefer you go the direction that I'm suggesting, or here's the feedback and a suggestion or something, right? Like I have a preference that you ultimately do that. Of course, that's why I'm sharing it. But it's still up to you. It's your decision to make, your life, your role, what have you. So, there's something in that, like, if I'm offering it as information, as kind of like a gift, right? Like the tension is, I want to share this with you, but I'm leaving it up to you what you do with it. Versus, no, I would actually like something to change, right? It feels important to me that something changes. I would say in that case, feedback may be a part of what you want, but it's not like the predominant part, and it's certainly not the way it should be framed. And what should be
Um,
framed about the what you're feeling or the impact or the experience. Yeah.
this distinction between you should do a video or an article about this specifically because that distinction between feedback and like actually it's attention and I want something to change is like blowing my mind because that is
Mhm.
100%. I have like intertwined those two things and I offer feedback that's not really feedback. It's like, dear God, please change your behavior. It's driving me crazy. Um,
And that's
and
the loop.
no
This
wonder
is
that lands so badly. Like,
exactly, this is the loop because then you do that, it lands badly, predictably, right?
uh
And
huh.
then and then it's not because you're not learning or people are. It's like no, you learn, but you just kind of learn the wrong lesson, right? What you learn is so giving feedback is not very good to do because look at it's awkward or it creates conflict. So I better either try to hide it or be even more strategic and sneaky and nuanced and how right, which is like well now you're spiraling back down, and you're only going to make it more likely that people are going to continue to respond badly because they can feel this icky, weird mixture of like, you're not quite owning it, which we've got another, there's the whole owning your experience piece of it too. Um, that's like the bad cycle. I'm not really sure what to call it, like the reverse cycle or something.
This is funny. So you kind of answered Carol. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, Carolyn.
Carolyn, Carolyn, hi, Carolyn.
Carolyn.
Yeah.
Awesome. You said I find it creates conflict when I say I'm not available for the feedback and offer times when it actually started as a bomb.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Which
and then you
expect
said, I
probably
think you
more
pre-answered
attention.
my question. It's other tensions at play.
Yeah.
Um, which makes sense that it would be other tensions, but I still feel like I wonder. how to navigate that well, like, because that happens to me. This happened to me at work the other day. Someone started with a bomb in the middle of, like, I was at the bakery and it was a huge rush, and someone offered me feedback in the middle of the rush, and I was like, "That was not the time."
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I can share. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I haven't thought or written anything about it, but I can just what's occurring to me are definitely like actual situations or actually experiences where that's happened to me. And I'm, not perfect at any of the stuff or anything, but the best versions of my responses that have felt genuine and good to me, be curious what others think, have always been something like, "Oh, like, I'm not up for that right now. Like, I'm not taking that in." These are kind of the phrases that just kind of fall out of my mouth, right? Like, "I'm not up for that. I'm not in for that. I'm not processing that. I'm not considering that right now. Like, if you want to talk to me later about it, but like, I've got my brain is somewhere else. Like, I'm just not doing that." Kind of like a full nope, closed for business. If you would like to have business, right? You can ask, we can meet mutually, but it's kind of like this implicit assumption that because they're dropping the bomb on you, the norms of communication are such that you should be receptive to what they're saying. Except in this situation, right? It's starting off already in a weird setup where they haven't, you haven't consented to that conversation. Well,
right,
okay, and clearly, and if you don't want to have it, then having it is really more than your decision, right? That is going to be your responsibility. It's not necessarily a great position to be in, but that is your making that choice to continue the conversation. It's better to just say, not up for that at all right now. If you want me to hear anything that you're saying, I mean, you can, there again, nicer and stricter ways of doing it. Like, I care about what you have to say. Generally though, that's not the kind of sentiment that comes with it. It's more like, oh, right. Like, I can feel the charge. But instead of even getting into that, which is already a hook, you're already now derailed from trying to do whatever else you were doing. It's more just like, nope, no, 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 not doing that right now. Thank you. Talk to me later about it.
that makes sense. And I'm thinking about, Ben, full cognitive load, exactly. Also, Lars, yes, I'm pretty sure Substack Lives can be replayed. We're gonna figure this is our first time doing this, so
Yeah.
we're figuring it out, but I've been starting to research and it looks like there's a way to repost them. So
Yeah.
we're working on it. Um, thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, you're welcome. Uh, I'm thinking about what it would be like on my end if I was trying to offer feedback and someone was like, "No,
Yeah.
absolutely not." And I could feel like the tension, the conflict Carolyn's talking about. Like I would have this immediate like, "But what do you mean no?" Like I have to, especially if I'm not tracking my tensions and I'm like confident that I can come back to it later, especially if it's mixed up with actually attention and not just strict feedback. Like if I was just offering straight up clean feedback and someone said I'm not open for that, I feel like I would have nothing about that. But if the feedback was like, "Oh, this is the thing you're doing is not working for me and I need you to change," and then you say you can't hear me, then I can totally feel how I would have like a reaction.
Yeah.
Um,
Which I would have, right. Well, sorry, you can say more about that. And what
no,
do you,
no,
yeah.
that's I can see why Karen might be having this experience of saying no and people having conflicts about it because
Yeah.
that yeah,
Yeah, that's the nat and that to me, at least in my mind, right, I file that under like, "Oh, that's the good kind of discomfort." Like, that's the lesson that that person should learn, right? Like,
right.
yeah, if, I don't know, don't break into my house. If you would like to come over and visit, then, like, ring the doorbell, dude. Like, yes, if you start coming to my window in the middle of the night, then, yeah, I'm probably gonna yell and scream at you and tell you, "Get the fuck out of here." Kind of like, yeah, you should feel like that was a little weird. And you should feel embarrassed and uncomfortable. Yes, good.
Instead of
Now,
me
if you
just
want to talk
vomiting
about
feedback
how to
at him.
avoid, yeah, if you want to talk about how to avoid that happening, let's talk about how to, because I didn't want that to happen either. Yeah,
Um, thank you, Lars, for that. That's very encouragaging.
yeah, I still
Please
work
come
with
on
you.
first. Yes, exactly. Um, thank you, Carolyn. This is great. Um, what was I gonna say? Oh, it reminds me, I lived with someone once who had we had very different views about pretty much everything. And I would come upstairs to make a sandwich and they would just be like, "Gay marriage, blah, 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 blah." And I was like, whoa, super not prepared. Like, I'm just here to make a sandwich, like not at all
Yeah,
ready to have this conversation. And then after like weeks of that, a friend of mine was like, "Dude, you can have this conversation." And so we had an intentional, like I walked upstairs, I'm like, "I'm prepared to talk to you now." And we like sat down and talked for like 5 hours and it was one of the best conversations I ever had. But like I thought about that because I was very confused. I'm like, I feel like I have great communication skills, but I was so defensive every time
Yeah.
she would say anything. And then it finally hit me, like, this is my ongoing analogy about this, about the consent piece. It's like if a professional baseball player was sitting in his living room watching TV and
Mhm.
someone threw an 80-mile-an-hour fastball at him from the kitchen, there's no way he would hit it, even though he has the skills to hit an
Yeah, that's a great
80-mile-an-hour
meta yeah,
fastball.
exactly.
But if you walked up to him and said, "Hey, do you wanna go out back and play ball?" Then, like, then you're ready to use all the skills that you have at your disposal, but, like, the getting blindsided is just freaking brutal. Um,
Totally. And there's an interesting little connection too between the, or integration maybe of the tracking element kind of, um, but it's not exactly the same because tracking as we refer to it, or refer to in the video means kind of literally almost like writing it down, right? And then having a note somewhere. Um, but there's a parallel of like tracking in your head the context that you're in, right? So if someone says something like they just start going into something that might, be uncomfortable, you don't really want to get into it, right? Kind of recognizing like, oh, okay, you want to have, and this could literally be, I mean, this is how I would do it. You literally reflected back to the person. Oh, it sounds like you want to have a conversation. You're kind of like, I'm navigating contexts before I just automatically jump into a specific kind of context. I mean, again, normally it just works fine, right? This is not a big deal. I'm talking specifically about those instances where there's a big disconnect between, the context someone assumes or throws you in and the one that you think you're in or would like to be in, right? So they just start doing that. That's that moment of like, oh, cool, cool. But like, I'm not, again, back to like in my head, and I might even literally have my hand, right? Like, I'm actually, I need to have a moment to consider whether or not I want to get into that kind of conversation. And that's a right of mine that I can just assert. And so if you're not up for that, then, it's kind of important for yourself. There are, better and worse ways of doing it, but it's important for yourself because if you don't, then it still may be fine, right? But it's just super risky because you already kind of don't really want to be having that conversation right then.
right. Read the room, exactly. Own my ish. Exactly, that's perfect, that's a perfect setup for the next video, which first off, uh I was planning on talking for, like, an hour. I don't know if that feels too long for all of you listening, like, you guys don't have to stay the whole time clearly, but, we never actually talked, I don't think, Chris, about how long we're planning on
Yeah, I think
talking
just an
for.
hour. I mean, again, yeah, I mean, yeah, and Ruth and I will talk. We meet for an hour, and then it is always 2 or 3 hours. So, but for this, we probably should keep it to an hour.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the own my ish that Lars just set us up for was the 3rd video that you had shared about, which is probably the one that has the first one about consent I've thought about a lot
Yeah,
because of that person I lived with, and then the tracking was, like, really helpful, but then the 3rd one about owning your own experience, this has probably been the most life-changing thing that I've read of yours that I've implemented, not even at work, just, like, in every
right.
relationship that I have, I've been practicing this, and I noticed that I haven't been practicing it this week, and I can feel the difference, which is the
Mhm.
idea that and it's so simple, it's, like, ridiculously simple, but the idea of, like, in your language as you're speaking, acknowledging that this is, like, my perspective. So you say things like, let's see. Oh, like, "From my perspective, it feels like blah, 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 blah," or like, uh, "It seems to me that you asked me to take out the trash," or like, "From according to my memory, I thought you said blah, 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 blah." Like, just those qualifications, I'm starting to say them almost before everything I say to anybody, and not quite, but it's been really helpful for me because
Yeah.
I grew up evangelical Christian, we were talking about this the other day, and I tend
Mhm.
still towards, like, there is a right way. Like, I'm no longer evangelical Christian, but I haven't unpacked fully the evangelical piece of my thinking, where I tend
Yeah.
towards, like, "Oh, this new thing is, like, the thing. It's amazing." And so to add in my own language, like, from my perspective, has been really humbling,
Yeah.
like, not in a bad way, like, it just reminds me that, like, "Oh my god, everybody has a different perspective, and my way is not necessarily the way." Well, I mean, it's absolutely not the way, like, it's one piece of the prism of humanity's views of everything,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
it's
and Ben
yeah, go
mentioned.
ahead.
Sorry, if you want to.
No, no, I just it's been really, really, really mind-blowing, like, for myself, and then I can feel there's, like, less defensiveness in my conversations from both sides because
Mhm.
I feel less attached to people hearing what I'm saying because I'm aware this is just my perspective, and then I'm more open to their perspective even if they're not couching it with, "This is my perspective," like, it's
Which
just
they
been
don't. Right, typically. Yeah.
really blowing my mind.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things to say about it. I mean, one is, like, full acknowledgement. This comes from, Michael Porcelli. These, he's a friend of mine, and the kind of his work and authentic relating. Now he's got his own thing called meta relating. So he's written articles on owning your experience. It wasn't just him, but also the people, at the Integral Center doing a lot of like circling and authentic relating. Um, yeah, so owning your experience. Yeah, like the story in my head seems to me, I believe that anything. I mean, yeah. So Ben mentioned like the classic I statements. I would say yes. That it's like the spirit of the I statements. Historically, I statements are, I would say, a subcategory of this, right? But they don't cover all of the things. It's more like subjectivity statements. But the other really, really cool way of defining it, it's probably my favorite way of defining it, is to speak inarguably, right? Like when I say I think that, it seems to me that, even if I'm like, I am 1,000% confident that this is true, right? That's how it seems to me. Everything I'm looking at is telling me this is the absolute truth, right? I can say that while still adding in the subjectivity owning my experience statements. And it's inarguable, the statement I just made, right? It's not someone can't debate me on what I think or what seems to me. It's you just can't debate it. Um, and of course, you could still have arguments and things. So that's kind of the effect of like reducing the noise or the traps that are implicit in speaking in absolutes, that tend to kind of detract from the actual connection and information sharing, right? Because if someone speaks in such a way where they're making it seem like this is absolutely the truth, there is almost like a social mechanism that comes online that actually makes us want to push against that, right? It's actually, a good social hygiene element, like to have someone oppose a certain direction. So you're if anything like stimulating a bit of like an artificial reaction to someone's communication when you don't do that. So it's more in some ways about just kind of reducing that likelihood and just getting into the truth of it. Like you may disagree, you may completely agree. I don't know, but by doing it that way, you're reducing the likelihood. And so it has this kind of two factor effect. It makes the communication much easier, even if you have disagreements, because you're less likely to artificially trigger or prompt resistance. But as you mentioned, Ruth, just for yourself, I call it like the hygiene factor, right? Like I prefer speaking that way because I can almost speak more confidently, right? Because for the same reason, like no one can argue with what I'm about to say. So yeah, that feels really good. So, there are versions of it that could be overdone, or a bit like mechanical or artificial, right? So it's not something that has to be done all the time with every statement. That would be too much. But at least occasionally, and I would add, especially when there's any sort of like tension, on the topic or conflict, right? Then sprinkle it in pretty liberally. In those situations, it's a little harder to overdo it. You know.
Um, and as some of the people are commenting some things, Ben said that sovereign narrative needs to be paired with internal self-confidence. That's so interesting because from my perspective in practicing this, I think I feel more self-confidence by practicing this.
Yeah.
Like because there's something about speaking from like from my like even just what I just said, like from my perspective, I'm like, "Oh yeah, that is my perspective." And like it's just mine. And it, like, almost makes me more confident in what I'm saying and, like, less
Yeah.
worried about what someone else says because that's just gonna be their perspective, and they're allowed to have their perspective, and there's, like, not a
Yep.
conflict about it. It's very interesting. Like,
Yeah, I would say, like, you're less, entrenched. It's not like a strong entrenchment. It's more like that subtle, implicit entrenchment, like you're setting the stage for confrontation, essentially. So confrontation may not happen, but we could look at it and say, but making it likely that confrontation could happen, making it much more likely, that, by kind of establishing a certain kind of position is going to greatly increase the chances of there being conflict. Conversely, right, if you communicate that way, you kind of find yourself naturally more open too. Like, I think that, but without like having to do a lot of mental gymnastics, right? It's just like I kind of feel also more open. I don't feel like I must defend that because it is inarguable, right? What I just said. And if the converse is true. So if you don't do that, then you start getting into a much weirder space where a lot of other stuff gets wrapped up into, does the other person understand? Does the other, and then there's understanding and agreement, which we can talk about. I've written about that before too. Yeah. So there's just a lot of weird dynamics that happen when you don't do that.
Yeah, I've experienced that. I have people in my life who speak very like their way is their view is this is fact, and I notice myself get instantly defensive and have to. It's challenging. I've been struggling with like how to maintain the fact that that's just their perspective, even though they're speaking like it's truth. And um,
Yeah, it's tricky. I think when we talked about it before, if I could share it, I was what was it? Oh, I was saying how like I sometimes just do the translation in my head, right?
right,
So, like they're speaking that way, and in my head, I'm like, okay, they think that. Okay, that's their opinion, and I will sometimes, even if I'm feeling particularly clever or whatever, right, can listen and reframe it that way, right? They're like, this is what happened, this is how it is, this is what we must do, whatever. And I'm like, okay, got it. So you think that we need to go that direction, like your opinion, you're completely confident that's the direct, and they'll be like, yeah, right. It's like, phew, right? That just kind of like levels it down. It helps them stay less entrenched, right? And it also, again, is back to the hygiene. It's like it's just helping me try to hear you. It can get, you can get really explicit about it. Well, because it's not. I mean, what we're talking about, when this is not that complicated a concept. The problem is, it's just not one to educate someone on in the moment, right? Like it's the thing to like know about and learn about and like try out, and then maybe in the future, right? You could ask somebody, So I've used agreements like that, like if asked to reframe something by owning your experience, then I'll do that, right? That helps me too, right? So I'm going to do my best to own my experience, speak inarguably, but if at any point I don't, right? Or you feel like it would be helpful for you to hear me if I did, right? Invitation to ask me to repeat what I said or what I'm asking, by owning my experience or something. And those moments, I will just tell you every time a little bit like, "Oh, I think I already am." But but fair, right? But fair point. Like the whole point is I want you to hear what I'm saying. I think I was already doing that, but it doesn't matter. That's the way this works. You need me to do it again, then happy to do it again.
from my perspective, I was already doing that. uh-huh.
Exactly.
That's a really cool agreement to have with someone. I'm like thinking about people in my life that I don't even work with that are just in my life that I'm like, that would be an interesting conversation because I can feel
Yeah.
that tension regularly. And Lars
Yeah,
said some
again,
things that are
you just need to
sorry, go
have
ahead.
the conversation before there's an issue. Right?
Right.
I guess that's not the time to do it, or I've never had
No.
any success with that, yeah.
Yeah, no, in the moment is I love the idea of like meta conversations. Like let's have conversations about how we have conversations, not in the moment when we're dealing with conflict.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
uh-huh.
right.
Lars said some things that I'm curious to hear. So, okay, so he said, I agree with your point about confidence, Ben, and everything else Ben's posted. Sweet. There's also a place for caring or not about the other person's giver or receiver's experience as a component of my own value system. Um, I'm curious to hear more about that, Lars. What do you mean by as a component of your own value system? And then he said, confidence in the context of power dynamics. I'm eager for disconfirmation. Also curious about that.
Yeah, Ben's comment about it, oh gosh, I'm losing, um,
I know it's interesting to have a conversation while navigating
the
conversations.
sovereign this has been I think the sovereign narrative needs to be paired with internal self-confidence. I think that's maybe what was referenced to, but I might need more context. I've lost the bigger thread of the
Well, that's right. I know,
oh.
me too. Chris Spot. Universal translator Chris Spot.
Mhm,
If we all need that Chris Spot translator.
mhm. Yeah, a lot of code switching.
Um,
Yeah, so stuff like, I mean, I'll just say like stuff like owning your experience, broadly applicable. I get back to like particularly helpful in moments that might be fraught with emotion, which feedback can, for the other reasons of like the baggage that comes with that term, because most people have experienced it being used on them,
right,
as like it's not actually just feedback. People do actually expect you to do something with it. I'll go back to that, underline that question. Like, do I care if the other person does something with this? Or am I satisfied if they just hear it and then their judgment, what they do with it? And that may be nothing. If it's the second one, then that's feedback, right? If you care that they do something with it, then it still might be, I don't know, like it's not like, a strict dichotomy of like super light, just I don't really care at all, and then only really serious kinds of issues and requests. There's a spectrum, but it could, the point is just to highlight that it's not just a, information sharing. It's like there's some what consideration, some concern, to use that word very broadly, like you want something to change, or you want to get some sort of response back, and that has an organic pairing a bit with feedback, where it is rare, I have found, although I call it non-deliberative feedback. I did an article on it, where you almost like genuinely do not care about the other person's reaction to the feedback. Like, I don't know, like a lot with asynchronous work. Like I see a thing that you put together, right? And I see like two things that I'm like, oh, I don't really like that. And that picture is weird, right? I might just send you that message, um, and hopefully convey to you, like, you may have already thought about this. There may be 1,000 excellent reasons why they are exactly the way they are. And I may have one really bad reason, kind of like, do not take this too seriously, basically, right? Or if I
mm,
really think it's a big concern, then I'll express that too. I That's a kind of thing where like if the other person almost like didn't even respond to my message, generally I like to have some knowledge of like it was received. But other than that, like I don't care. Like if you're like, yeah, that's stupid. I don't even need that. Right. Like I'm like my tension is done. I don't know. I just gave you the thought. Bam, I'm out of here. On to the next. So there's that type, but a lot of the time there is something about like, and I would like to hear your reaction to the feedback. I'm
right.
curious, right? Like, it doesn't have to be that way, but generally that, again, if someone's making themselves receptive to hearing a thing, right? It's kind of a nice, often appropriate response to be open to hearing their reaction to that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Ben says, I think Lars is pointing to a values based conversation versus process based, and power dynamics and worse, money and things can get spicy. Power over dynamics.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, yes, spicy is the word.
yes, it is.
I use
And
that.
yeah, asynchronous communication is a whole new landscape.
Oh, yeah, and so that triggered something because it's like I don't. There wasn't in this set of videos, but it's another thing. I don't know where if I've ever published anything on it, but okay, so it's similar to the tracking. It's similar to this idea of like the asynchronous, and it's similar full circle back to the first question you asked, Ruth, about the use of the word feedback.
Hmm.
I'm curious what other people have to say about it. I am on a scale of 1 to 10, 8 in terms of my confidence that this is the right way of doing it, right? Or maybe, yeah, 7.9. I don't know, something like that. Um, it's this issue of like, if I like asynchronously, right? Like if I wanted to schedule some time with somebody to process a particular kind of interpersonal tension, or give feedback if it was genuine feedback, but it might be something like, I don't know, kind of embarrassing, like someone smells, they haven't showered, and you're kinda like, "Oh god, we're with clients, and, oh, this is not gonna be a fun conversation." Another reason why you might do the feedback bomb is because you've considered that the alternative, right, is to put that person in a position where I need to tell them I wanna talk about something awkward, and I wanna give them some feedback about something in 3 days' time, and will that time work for you? And then they're gonna have 3 days to stew and wonder what that's about. And that doesn't seem like a very nice thing to do to somebody, right? That this kind of issue. Okay, so I go back to like I'm like a 7.9 out of 10 on my confidence on this. My opinion is basically do it anyway and just do your best to balance that nuance, right? Where it's like, well, on one hand, I want them to know enough of the context of of the conversation, right? So they're prepared or they know how important it is or something. But at the same time, like I'm not going to tell them the whole issue because that's the whole reason why I want to have the proper environment to have that
Mhm.
conversation, right? So you know, I've experienced this. I see it happen, and I to me it just seems like the least of all possible evils is if someone says, "Hey, I want to give you some feedback. Can you meet with me tomorrow or our house Thursday at 10?" You know, it's like, yeah, okay, I can meet you at 10 and I'm going to maybe do a little story in my head about what that could be about and then I'm going to try to let it go and that's on balance though, right? Doing that kind of checks all these, well, not necessarily owning your experience, although that can be part of the communication too, right? You can own your experience in that initial communication. Hey, I have a thing that I want to talk about. It's a me thing that I want to share with you or talk to you about, right? It's my concern, maybe about the other person. Um, you know, so stuff like that can make that kind of invitation a little, I don't know, less awkward. But on balance, still, I think the better way of going about processing that than all these other alternatives.
Of, like, just dropping it on them or
Yeah,
yeah.
I, and with people's schedules and distributed team, like I just don't know of a super obvious great way of getting around that constraint. It's not great, but still better.
Lars says, "So bombing is a more merciful strategy." I think you were saying not bombing, but, like, you could see
Yeah.
why that would be. It could feel more merciful, so you're
Oh,
not.
right. Yeah, compared to like putting like, hey, I want to talk to you about this really horrible thing that you do, but I don't want to tell you what it is. I'll tell you next week. See you later. Right? It's just like, well, what? What? Just fucking tell me. Yeah. I mean, I get it. And yeah, and some of these things have to be translated a bit too to like asynchronous stuff, but in some ways they're also easier. So, for example, you can, I don't know if anybody's experienced this, probably have a feedback bomb message, right? It's not just something that happens and it's like you just get an email that's dumb. Living my life. I'm feeling pretty good. Had my lunch. Oh, Ruth sent me a message. It says, your latest article. Great. Oh, I can't wait to read how much she loved my latest article. I thought this really sucked and missed, you know, like that kind of stuff. It's like,
Right.
oh man, like, what are you doing? At least give me a chance. And I, you know, I think actually in the case with you and I, we've done a pretty good job. We haven't had that, that specific example, but being clear about like, an urgent message versus non-urgent or like any context you might need to know about the message going into it, though there's not usually any. So something like that, right? I would at the least put some sort of what like preface to it in the title, maybe in the message, right? Like, hey, if you're not in a space to receive feedback, do not read this message right now, right? Even that's better than just giving it, right? But you
Done
don't
that with
have to.
venting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
No,
no.
I've done that with venting specifically where I've, like,
Oh,
left a
venting
voice
is a
note
great
for a
one.
friend venting where I said, "Okay, I'm just gonna be venting, and if you don't wanna listen, that's fine, just skip this message." And then
Yeah.
I vented for, like, 7 minutes, and then they later were like, "Thank you so much for the heads up," and they totally listened, and it was great, but the fact that I, like, prefaced
Yeah,
it with, "Here's what you're about to hear," shows
yeah,
or like, it's up to you, you don't have to listen.
yeah, exactly, like trigger warning kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. You know, at least in that same spirit, you know, of like, hey, just so you know. And again, owning your experience basically never go wrong, right? Where it's like, hey, just so you know, I could be overthinking this. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe, right? You say stuff like that. I mean, it's really difficult for someone on the receiving end to not feel about as receptive as they can,
Right.
right? Like you're not adding anything extra to it at that point.
Yeah, it's been really, really helpful to do that. Like I said, this last week or 2, I think I've been moving, so I just it's a new habit, and so I kind of forgot to do it, and I'm like, I've been way more grumpy and judgmental of other people in the not owning my experience for myself. Like,
Mhm.
I've just noticed, like, my ego is much more like, "Rah, rah, 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 everyone's doing it wrong in my ways," and I was like, "Whoa, okay. Hold your horses."
Yeah. Well, right. And that yeah, that's a fun topic too. I mean, what do you do with those beliefs that are I mean, where like owning your experience doesn't feel good or accurate somehow? Because I think that's like I would just add, like it's important to also acknowledge, right, fundamentally, that there are beliefs that we have that don't that yeah, I don't know, it feels true. And
Right.
not like kind of true. It doesn't just seem to me true, right? It's like powerful in my body mind as like a compelling belief that's whatever. Like, that I mean, we can talk about like intrapersonal processing. Like, what do you do? So I'm a fan of Byron Katie's The Work, for example,
Yeah.
right? So that's my for that set of like, yeah, this is a belief, a judgment of myself or someone else that feels very true, and it's not good. Doesn't feel good. There's that process for kind of untangling that mess. But in general, when communicating with others, right? Like it is almost always helpful to at least try to reframe it.
This is an interesting point Ben makes too, or excuses the other person for bad behavior. Like, that's an interesting I'm gonna have to think about how I would address that. Like, yeah. Mhm.
Address the what?
But, like, if you owning your experience feels like it's excusing the other person for bad behavior, like, how do you navigate owning your experience in a way that what I'm hearing behind that, Ben, you can tell me if this is right or not, is, like, how do you kind of hold someone else accountable for their behavior when their behavior is hurting someone in a way that's still owning your, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, a couple options come to my mind, but I could just quickly like one is like you can ask for permission to not own your experience, right? Like, is that cool? Can I just do that? Like, I'm trying this new practice that I saw this guy talk about owning your experience. I'm trying that, but I don't. That feels weird. Can I just not do that for a little bit? Most people will be up for that. Um, I forgot what the
That's
other.
true. I have asked that I have someone in my life who really doesn't do well with anger at all, and one day I was feeling very angry at them, and I asked permission, like, "Can I just be really angry at you for a minute and just vent my anger?" And they were like, "Sure," and I was shocked because every time there's been anger around this person, they've, like, shut down, but the fact that I asked, then I just, like, vented, and it felt really nice on my end, and then they actually heard me, and it was kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, 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 awesome. Yeah, so that's one. I mean, and the other one is this is kind of gets into this whole other thing of like, what expectation did they violate? Kind of right. And there's
Huh,
a few categories. Like if they violated something explicit, there's a whole way you would go about processing that. If they
right,
violated something that's not explicit, but you think kind of like should be obvious or is reasonable to expect that they should have known, that's kind of how I phrase it, kind of a middle ground, then that has a certain way of processing. And then there's the other category of like, no, probably not explicit. And they probably couldn't have guessed that that would have been my expectation. And I'm still disappointed. And I think they still shouldn't have done it. Cool. But that just has like a different way of going about handling that kind of conversation. But so the easy part is basically just trying to first orient around, was there something explicit that they agreed to that you
right.
think they violated? That's infinitely easier to go about processing, but certainly not always an option.
Makes sense. Consent to use you statements. Exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to blame the crap out of you right now. Are you fine with that? Great.
Yeah. Totally.
Uh-huh.
I've seen that work on a lot of different contexts, variations of that.
Really, asking for consent really like makes such a remarkably huge difference. Like, I'm like, you can yell and scream at me if I'm like prepared that that's what you're gonna do, and I've said yes, I'm sure, go for it. And or
Right.
like if I'm like, no, I like haven't slept and haven't eaten, and it's not gonna go well.
Right.
Um,
And we didn't
yeah.
even really get into like the receiving side of it too much, I don't think. Maybe we did. But I think of like a whole other or complementary set of things that you might do if you're on like the receiving. Oh, I mean, we did kind of like if someone's kind of dropping a bomb on you, how you might be like, nah, not up for that right now, not making space for that. Um, Another one that comes to my mind, oh yeah, we're at time, but another one that comes to my mind is, let's say you consent to the feedback, right? And you could imagine like maybe it gets into it, and then you find that you're not because you thought it was going to be about the spinach dip that you made, and it turns out it's
Thanks, Ben. Yeah,
like
we're at
something. Yeah, there are occasions if you suspect it could get dicey, but you want to be available and receptive and open, right? Even just stating that, like yeah, I'm up for it, but this is something that I've said, right? Like, but I want to reserve the right to kind of say, you know what, I think this is too much, or I'm done, or can we just do it later at some point, and kind of like make sure I haven't just like opened the flood, like it wasn't just like a one, consent decision and now just go at it. It's more about making sure I'm able to stay more in connection with my own
Right.
stuff amidst the process. Okay, cool.
I love
Well, this
that.
was fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks everyone for being here. We're gonna start doing this regularly, not just with me. We'll have Chris have conversations with other people. If any of
Yeah.
you want to have a conversation with Chris, let us know. And
Yeah.
then in 2 weeks, we're gonna do an office hours. We're gonna start doing that regularly too. So if
Hmm.
you have any things you want to talk about, like actually on video live with a human, that human being Chris and me, I'll be there too.
Yeah,
Um,
and the office hours, I think if we do this like through Zoom and stuff, right, that we'll have
yeah. We'll do it on the
other video
same.
feeds and like, yeah, it won't just, this was the Substack live experiment, um, which is more
Yeah, office hours will be Zoom, and it'll be the same time in 2 weeks,
cool.
with both friends. I'm assuming you'll do a Substack post or something mentioning it. Um, cool. Thanks, everyone. This is awesome. Thanks
Thanks,
for being part
everyone.
of our experiment.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. So glad to see you. Take care. Don't be strangers.
Bye.
Talk soon. Bye.